they wanted to sell. No one's happy. Publisher isn't happy because now they have to go after the author for the money, and the author's not happy because they're being sued for the money. So it's a no-win situation really for anyone, and I wouldn't even sign on to that type of agreement if it were me. But again, the rights to all material is retained by the publisher in traditional publishing. So those are the critical aspects of traditional publishing in today's market. But we all know that self-publishing has come about over the last 30, 40 years, kind of full force. The internet has made it widely available, and there are hundreds of thousands of self-publishing companies out there who will self-publish your book. And we should talk about those a little bit as well. So with self-publishing, typically a good self-publisher will allow you to make the choices about your book. As an author, I know at least with mine, I had an idea the entire time I was creating my book what I wanted it to look like and how I wanted it to be presented. And I'm sure many of you do as well. So it's really important that you have a discussion with your publisher and tell them how you want your book to look and feel. Whether you want it to be hardcover, softcover, color interior, black and white, that sort of thing. But they don't pay advances. That's a downside if any author is looking for an advance. I don't look for it. I never expected it, so it wasn't any big deal for me. But I know a lot of authors expect an advance because they feel they've written this incredible bit of material. So, but a lot self-publishing companies do not pay advances, so you can't expect that from them. They absolutely have to have input from the author to create the book, and it typically takes a little faster to create, 1 to 2 months. The publisher will still determine the final retail price because they still have to make sure that the costs are covered on the book production itself. And the author pays for marketing and/or promotion. The good thing about self-publishing companies is they typically pay higher royalties, and the difference being for a lot of traditional publishers, you can look at maybe 5, 10, and if you're really lucky, up to 15% royalty based on the sale price of the book. Self-publishing pays 50% or more sometimes. So I know our company pays 50% royalty on the retail sale of any book. So the royalties are much higher. Typically they're non-selective about the material submitted, and the author retains the rights to the material, which is a very important aspect if that's something you're looking for. The big difference between the two, again, traditional publishing, the publisher pays all the costs of producing the book. Self-publishing, the author pays the costs of producing the book.
You're missing a bullet. Distribution for what you're calling self-publisher. What's the distribution?
The distribution, well, it will depend upon the publisher. For example, some self-publishers have no distribution. They just publish the book. We provide varied distribution. We provide distribution through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Ingram's, Follett Library Resources, and a number of other distributors, all included in our pricing. So it will greatly vary upon the publisher that you choose, and it's a good question to ask them.
Now, are you going to distinguish between print on demand and self-publishing? You're talking about a company that you go with as an author.
Absolutely. Yeah, print on demand is something totally different than publishing, so just so we're all on the same page. Print on demand is a type of printing, and we do actually go through this later on.
Okay.
And there is offset printing, and digital. Print on demand is also called digital printing, which is probably the more accurate word as opposed to print on demand. So you have offset printing, and you have digital printing. Offset printing, usually you have to have a minimum number of copies printed of your book. That's the downside of it. So you might have to order 500 or even 1,000 copies of your book, and then cross your finger and hope to sell it. All right? But digital printing or print on demand, that's not the case. The quality of the books are relatively the same, and you can order 1, 10, 1,000, 2 million copies, whatever you want. The downside is that it's typically a few dollars more to get the book printed digitally than it is on an offset press. So that's the downside. So you gotta weigh them out and what your preference is. If you feel you can get rid of 1,000 copies easily, you can get them printed offset and get them done much cheaper. That means more money in your pocket. If you're not really sure how many you're going to sell, then you get them done digitally, and then it doesn't matter because you don't have to worry about how many you have to print and sell. You get them done as needed. So that's the difference between the two. Okay? Now, typically your traditional publishers, they do everything on an offset press. They don't do much digitally because they're keeping their costs way down to maximize their profits. But self-publishing houses typically will do digital printing because they are concerned about inventory. Typically, they don't want to hold any inventory. They only want to print when the sale is done. And the networks and distribution systems are set up to work with that, so that if someone orders a book through Amazon, the order is sent